Good morning, Foundry. It is great to be here. I've been here twice before. This is my third time. I think the last time was before COVID, so probably 4 or 5 years ago. So I probably looked a little bit younger back then. But it's a little dark out there, but you're looking a little older than 4 or 5 years ago, too. So just saying. Yeah, the other thing is I found myself in a new space 3 years ago, being single for the first time in 34 years. True story. My buddy Mark over here, I hadn't been on a date as a single person in 34 years. I call him on the way to the very first date I had. Fish, you've got to help me out here. I don't know anything about wine. I'm going to look like some hillbilly redneck from Harford County. Give me a crash course on wine. So he's breaking it down. Well, there's red, there's white, blah, blah, blah. And, I'm like, he's saying there's this, I'll take that, not this. And so, I show up and feel like, all right, I at least know something here. So I've had to ask for a lot of advice, not having been in this space for 34 years. And so I ask curious questions. I like to learn. And so what I found out was that in the dating world, the top 5 things that are not sexy. All right, you ready for this? Drum roll, drum roll. Okay. Top 5 things that I found just by asking curious questions that are not sexy. Number 1, nose and ear hair. Number 2, I'm not calling anybody out here, but guys who play air guitar during worship, not sexy. A couple of you in the back unnamed. Here's a funny one. Guys on dating sites that are holding the fish that they caught. Not cool. And then this one cracks me up too. All the guys that are wearing hats and they're thinking nobody's going to know that they're bald, right? and then the 5th one is presentations on thinking patterns. Oh, you didn't see that coming. I see the look of surprise. Presentations on thinking patterns. It's not a glitzy, glamorous, sexy topic at all. When Scott asked me to speak on this, I was just like, oh my gosh, I think I'd rather walk across broken glass or something. It doesn't sound exciting, right? So then I kind of thought about it a little bit more and realized, and I'm going to get more into this in a minute, that there's some foundational things about thinking patterns that lay groundwork, lay a foundation. Think about anything you've ever done well in your life. You had to learn fundamentals and basics. So this morning, we're kind of going back to basics, as it were. I'm going to throw out 3 vignettes to you and see if you see yourself in any of these vignettes. So vignette number 1, and see if you can name what distorted thinking pattern each vignette is. So vignette number 1, guy gets a P&L sheet in his business that's a little less than stellar, and he stresses over it, thinks, oh my gosh, if I get 4 more of these in a row, I'm out of business, and then my house is going to foreclose, and then my wife's going to divorce me, my kids are going to be homeless, all my friends are going to think I'm a loser, who do I know that might be hiring? All this from one P&L sheet that's not great. I'm probably going to be alone when I die. Who's going to come to my funeral? Just play it out. So that one is catastrophic thinking, catastrophe. Mark would vouch. I know a little bit about catastrophic thinking. That vignette was actually me 20 years ago. That's what I would do. Vignette number 2, something bad happens to you, such as your car breaks down, and you're like, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have bought the new car. It broke down. Or I shouldn't have bought the used car. And you go on and on beating yourself up over how it's your fault. Or maybe your kid gets in trouble at school. And instead of saying, okay, my child's a human being, how do I give them instructions, some guidance, etc., you blame yourself. And you're like, here's all my mistakes as a parent because they were talking during class. I'm a miserable failure. So that one is personalization and blame. So taking personal responsibility for every bad thing around you. The third one, in a weak moment, you say something impatient, unkind to somebody, whatever the case may be. But you feel such shame about it that you can't bring yourself to really come to grips with you made a mistake. And so you get mad at the other person and you blame them. Or it's the opposite. You just berate yourself over and over and over again. I talked with a woman this week who thinks she cannot make mistakes, and she self-sabotages because her thinking, there's a lot involved, and we'll get to some of it in the Q&A. I don't want to have a spoiler. So the Q&A is going to be great. Stay on the edge of your seat. So yeah, these thinking patterns can really get us in trouble. That one is all or nothing thinking. I need to be perfect. If I'm not, then I'm a miserable failure. No in between ground. All right, so a couple others I'm just going to briefly mention. Other common distorted thinking patterns. Overgeneralization. This is always or never. My wife always leaves the kitchen a train smash. He never gives me a kind word. These are overgeneralizations. Discounting the positive. I talked to somebody once who his wife said, "Why do you give me flowers? They're just going to die anyway. Why do you do, why do you buy this for me? That's a waste of money." So discounting the positive. And people that don't have self-worth and are engaged in a downward spiral negative thinking pattern will do that. They'll discount the positive. Maybe you know somebody, or maybe you're that person that has trouble taking a compliment. Jumping to conclusions. Assuming somebody is mad at you because they're in a bad mood. Like how many of us have gotten that email or that text message that said, can we talk Tuesday at 10 o'clock? And immediately your mind starts going, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. They're mad at me. And your body feels weak. I've been there. We all have. That's jumping to conclusions. Control fallacies. Thinking that I can control everything or I can control nothing. Shoulds. Having unrealistic expectations of myself or other people. So there's probably a lot more. I didn't go to an Ivy League school, so that's all I have. You have to go to Google. They didn't teach us anymore in my state school. Hashtag state schools. Do you resonate with any of these vignettes? If you do, tune in. I'm going to go through some ways to turn that around. If not, I have two suggestions. One would be you could go to Amazon, get some shopping done, or go to your fantasy football app and start working on next year's draft. But for the rest of us, what I want to say is positive thinking patterns, they're foundational. They lay the groundwork to experience God's goodness and presence in our lives. They're kind of like, I read a business book that some of you all might have read that's been popular for 25 years called Good to Great by Jim Collins. Or actually, I think it was a sequel, Great by Choice. He tells the story of two explorers who both go to the South Pole. And so there's the one is Scott, he's a British guy. The other one's Amundsen, he's a Norwegian guy. So I naturally gravitate toward Amundsen because I'm Scandinavian descent. So, but that's beside the point. So they had two different approaches. Scott was like, hey, when the weather's good, and it's 30 degrees and sunny, we're going to go like 40 miles. We're going to kill this. And when it's blizzard conditions, we're going to hunker down in our tents, and we're going to wait for a better day. Amundsen said, we're doing the 20-mile march. And so what happened, long story short, was the 20 mile, he's like, we're going 20 miles if it's a blizzard. If it's 40 degrees and sunny, we're stopping at 20 miles. In reality, they only averaged 15 miles, but it was simple, methodical, consistent. Scott's team all died because it got too harsh. They didn't get out of there in time, and they didn't make it out before the really harsh weather came, and they all froze to death, found notes in their stuff years later. Admondson's team made it down in and out. The thinking patterns, it's foundational like that. There's a discipline to it that will serve us all well. All right, so to dive into that, lots more I could say about that. How do you change negative thinking patterns? Well, it's all about cognitive reframing is point number one. So I'm going to weave a little bit of the spiritual in here. There's this guy named, we're in a place with stained glass windows, St. Ignatius. Anybody ever heard of St. Ignatius? He has this thing called the Examen that's every night reflecting on the day in two areas. One is called desolation, and that's where you felt pain points. You didn't feel God's presence. The other one is consolation. That's where you felt God's compassionate, tender presence. Cognitive reframing said, and the Bible says this in Philippians 3. It says that I want to know Christ and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow to attain to the resurrection from the dead. There's a progression there that through suffering, that's the desolation that St. Ignatius would call it. In desolation, that's where God's doing his deepest work inside of us. That's cognitive reframing, saying God hasn't abandoned me. God is forming me to the image of Christ the most in these times. I'm in the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings. So that's point number one. Then the next one, just suggestion, would be quarantine your negative thoughts. So set a limit on them. Nobody can handle thinking negative thoughts 24/7. And that's what happens, is you wake up at 2 a.m. thinking about them, quarantine. Give yourself time to think about those things, but put boundaries and limits on that. Set a 5-minute timer, for example. Replace negative thoughts with positive ones. Philippians 4:8 tells us what to think about. The things that are true, right, pure, lovely, admirable. If anything's excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. One way we could do that is, these phones have a notes app. Keeping a gratitude journal. What am I grateful for? Those are the things lovely, excellent, praiseworthy. So that's another way to turn that around. I'm going to do a couple more, and then we're going to do Q&A. The next one I really like, Ecclesiastes 4:9. It just says this simply: two are better than one. Two are better than one. Sometimes you need an outside perspective. So one of my friends said he's single as well. He's like, Eric, how can I help you? How can I pray? I'm like, all right, Gary, here's how you can help me. I think that everybody's feelings are my responsibility. I need you to tell me it's okay to say no if someone's not for you, because I'm afraid to hurt their feelings. That's how you can help me. So he tells me that every other day. Hey, it's okay to say no. You're not responsible for the mental health and well-being of every person on every dating app. That's not yours. That's God's job. And so that's helped me. That served me well. And sometimes we need to, when we're in a negative thinking pattern, we need to enlist somebody else's help to be the voice of reason who can speak that to us. The last thing that I would just say before Q&A is do something that calms your central nervous system. So whether that's working out, going for a walk, playing with your dog, listening to worship music or some other music, whatever it is, something that calms your central nervous system. Because what happens when we're in negative thinking patterns, our central nervous system is not in a good space. And sometimes calming that really can also help our mind to be more positive and productive. So hopefully something that I've rolled out in these 15 minutes has landed. So now we're going to transition to Q&A.
So here's what we're going to do. We've been kind of compiling some questions as the weeks have gone on. So we've got kind of a chair here for you, Eric, and I'll get one for myself as well. And I'm just going to, sit up here and have a casual conversation because I feel like you just read my emails and read my heart. And I know I'm probably not the only one that feels a little bit of resonance with this. And I just love, there's been so much good conversation that's been birthed in this series. And so thanks for, I really think like you kind of bring together 5 weeks of conversations in a really practical way. So thank you for that. I want to throw a couple questions out to you that have come in. And then we've got some others that have come to us as well in these few minutes. So you kind of talked about the role a little bit about spiritual disciplines, talking about the examine. But what role, when I grew up, it was like, read the Bible, have a quiet time, pray, and like God will be close. And you're giving a different invitation. So would you talk for a second about the role that spiritual disciplines play in kind of helping us have the mindset that you're speaking of?
So, let me take a few random thoughts on that. So I've been part of 2 different spiritual soul care programs that are 2 years long each over the last 5 years. And so there were retreats, books, whatever. There's all these different disciplines that we do. And so I noticed in there that some, like Lectio Divina, who's heard of Lectio Divina? Wow, man, this is cool. So I noticed that one, that really resonated with me. So I didn't worry about the ones that don't resonate. I noticed silence and solitude. There was some great things, but there were some hard things. I'm like, this is really good for me. This is helping me, but it's not easy. I need to do this one. I'm going to embrace this. And so I think we're all unique and different. For me, I am not musical at all, but I love listening to worship music. I love going on a nice warm night, having the windows down, just driving around, listening to worship music, looking at the stars. To me, that's a spiritual discipline that helps me. So I don't try to tailor it toward what somebody else says. All Christians should be X, Y, Z, and they're like the poster child for that, but that doesn't do it for me. Then I find something that does, and I engage in that. I will say in college, I'm not like this as much now, but I memorized scripture in college. I memorized the entire book of Philippians in college at one point, and those verses come back. I didn't have Philippians 3 in my notes. It just comes back. So things that were disciplines years ago, I'll be in situations, and even though I haven't memorized a lot of new scriptures in quite a while, the ones I have, they're in here. They're a foundation.
Yeah, that's good. This is one I think a lot of us have dealt with over the course of the past 6 weeks. So much of this has been about like awareness of our thought life.
Yeah.
Okay. So when is a distracted mind a positive strategy, right, and when is like a distractive mind a negative strategy?
Right, yeah.
Like, I'm just going to keep busy.
Right.
And some of us are like, no, you need to confront something.
Yeah.
So how would you maybe determine resourceful or unresourceful?
Okay. Well, let me address those 5 people on their fantasy football app right now. You're distracted. So sometimes a distracted mind is good, because if it's not distracted, we have a word for that. It's called ruminating, and ruminating's not good. Sometimes not thinking about something at all, that's not good either. We have a word for that. It's denial. It's avoidance. So we want to hit that happy medium of thinking about the things we should think about. problem solve, think it through, have some self-awareness. Hey, what was triggered in me when X, Y, Z? I have to look at all that and ask the right questions, but just not 24/7. I need to quarantine that, so avoid both extremes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's kind of a follow-up question. I feel like you kind of answered it. Like, this is one that came in just a few minutes ago. How can we balance the luxury of quarantining those negative thoughts, but also honor kind of the great suffering in the world? You know, like that. I mean, anything more to say kind of in that, you know?
So the question is how to, you always repeat the question when you have no clue
yeah,
what
sure.
you're gonna
So
say.
yeah.
Oh.
So you just said a good and important thing about the distracted mind.
Uh-huh.
One of the questions that came in just in the text
Uh-huh.
was like, how do we balance the luxury of being able to quarantine negative thoughts while also honoring the great suffering in the world?
Oh, okay. So, right, so like having compassion and facing things that are problems, not just in our own life, but globally. We don't want to put our head in the sand and say, oh, I'm quarantining thoughts. So those people's problem, oh, well, yeah, what is it, Micah 6:8, another college little worship song. What is, God love, but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk, like, oh yeah, that stuff, no, I'm not doing that. I'm quarantining those thoughts. Yeah, it's that balance again of saying, okay, it's engagement and disengagement. Mm-hmm. And by the way, in any relationship, whether it's with the world, a marriage, a friendship, with God, relationships are involved two parts: engagement and disconnection. Engagement, and that's why there's desolation and consolation. It's that same kind of thing. So I think we practice that.
Yeah,
there.
like the difference between reading a long-form article and trying to find a cause to partner with than like imbibing 25 hours of podcasts and bringing just despair that we don't know what to do with.
Right.
Like there's a difference there. I want to shift gears a little bit. So being in the place of...
Let me say one other thing.
Sure,
that.
yeah.
So I think that discernment's important to say, what's God calling me to do? And I can't stress out over everything I would like to do, but either God's not calling me to do, or I don't have the resources at my disposal to do. I can pray, I can care, but my focus really should be on what's God equipped me to do, commissioned me to do, and focusing on that. Because there's peace in that. There's not despair and stress in that.
Yeah. And one of the things I've benefited from, this is a really good question that's come in. I've benefited so much from having someone like yourself in my life as a counselor to help me frame what are the things I should be paying attention to. So when someone's looking for a counselor, looking for someone to help them with this process of reframing, what might be some things they should be thinking about or looking for in a counselor if they're going to take that step?
I mean, I think number one is somebody who's emotionally present. So the counselor, and what I mean by that is they can enter into your space. They don't have all the answers, but they have questions. They want to know you. I would maybe walk the other way from a counselor that, thinking patterns. I mean, I gave some points, but by no means is that like, oh, you do those 7 points and you're good to go. I would walk away from a counselor that has that approach. Like, you have a problem, I have the answer to everything. You want somebody who's going to engage with you, be curious about your story. They're going to offer a presence, not just ideas, but a presence that is healing. I don't know, off the top of my head, those are a few things that I would look at.
And I would chase it with one other, like, what is a realistic expectation, right? Like, I have a conversation with a counselor and just everything suddenly feels better in the universe. Like, what might be a realistic expectation to have of the work of pursuing my mental health or finding a counselor?
Well, yeah, I would add, you want a counselor that views it as a partnership. That's honoring and respecting you. It's not honor and respect to say, well, you're a mess and I have all the answers. Those are not relationships built on honor and respect. So I would say that. And I would say it works all different ways. Sometimes there are light bulb moments where it was what you said. In an instant, oh, it all makes sense. Those are the exception. I think a realistic expectation is that it's the 20-mile march.
Yeah, yeah. This is another good question with the 20-mile march and all the things you put on the screen there. What role do the unresolved issues from our childhood or otherwise play into those thought patterns?
Right.
And what can we do about it?
Right. Yeah, so I mean, the big unresolved issue is trauma. So I talked to somebody recently who, like, she had this pattern of needing excessive reassurance from people. Can you put more emojis on that last text? I'm not sure you're really, like, present. And it was just constant. There was a thinking pattern of, I need all, but it's rooted in trauma. Let's say perfectionism. Let's say maybe somebody has a core unresolved issue in their life of perfectionism that, comes from somewhere in childhood. Well, that's going to cause perfectionistic thoughts in the present. And the really unfortunate part is when we go through that, then that becomes so demoralizing and catches us off guard that we begin to sabotage. And when it gets to that point that somebody's like, hey, I know I'm going to fall short, I know I'm going to drop the ball, that then they cause that to happen so at least they're not surprised. That's a classic example of an unresolved issue back here affecting the present.
Yeah. The one that just came in, and I think is a pretty easy one to answer fairly quickly, is worry or anxiety a sin?
Boy, yeah, I don't know the answer to that one, Scott.
I mean, it just.
But I know that question makes me stressed.
Yeah, right.
Kidding.
Like, yeah, right. It's like, I think we're trying to draw like some of the things we're trying to do in this series is to be aware of the things that are in our mind,
right.
and find the freedom in bringing those things before Jesus.
All right, I have an answer for it.
Yeah.
All right. So in my opinion, this is just my opinion. I think that worry or anxiety is a normal part of being human. When we pervasively in our life, as a pattern, we don't trust God, I think that can become a sin. Yeah. But I don't think the presence of that just shows that we're human. Yeah. What we do with that, I think, determines whether we're sinning or not. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. This is another one I think that a lot of us kind of wonder about because we've come from different backgrounds and streams of frameworks, even for how we understand Christian experience, right? There's some people who go like, well, anxiety means you don't pray enough. It's or whatever. So how might we? And this is another big question, right? How might we think about medication? Like, I know that's a kind of a hot button topic,
right.
And I'm not asking you to give like a one size fits all, but if we were just starting to think about that, how might we think about the role of medication?
Yeah, so medication's gotten a bad rap in some Christian circles. My opinion, I'm of the mindset that sometimes medication can give us the equilibrium and stability to do the work in therapy. I mean, if our central nervous system is just completely out of whack, our body's shaking, that's a terrible place to be. And some medication can calm those symptoms. So now I can focus and think straight and get a grasp on, what it is I need to work through, then that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that's, obviously there's such a thing as over-medication.
Right.
I don't necessarily buy into, like, somebody's been on antidepressants for 10 years. Oh, they shouldn't be on them. They're overly dependent. Well, I don't know. It could be numerous scenarios. Maybe they need that in order to have stability in their life. Maybe there's some things if they worked through or got a different therapy like EMDR, which is a whole other story. Maybe some of you have heard of that. I've had EMDR, and it completely calmed my central nervous system over something I was really just thrown off kilter about, and that helped me to be able to actually focus on some things. So, yeah, it's a complicated question.
Yeah, but it sounds like what you're saying is like maybe the danger is dismissing it entirely.
Right.
But then another danger is like believing it's the magic wand, right? That it just resolves, oh, well, I wasn't depressed. I was depressed, and now I'm not, thanks to insert pharmaceutical, and I'm the poster child for the commercials or whatever.
Yeah.
One more question, unless others come in. I have one more to go here. So we've talked about this from the framework of like maybe ourself and understanding ourselves. But if I have a friend, right, that I can really see struggling with their thought patterns, and they're spiraling, but they don't really seem to be aware of it, any good suggestions on how to like help them without making it worse?
Right. Yeah, we've all been there, right? I think again, everybody's different. So I think not having a preconceived notion in our mind, oh, I'm just going to come in, I'm going to fix A, B, C. Hey, do you realize, your thinking's really distorted. In fact, it's delusional. That's not going to work. But being present, like I would start with showing up, being present, being an empathetic, curious presence, supportive in their life, giving reassurance and asking questions. And then kind of discerning, okay, where are they? Are they at a spot where a little bit of feedback, would help them? Or would that push them further away? Oh, they don't understand. We have to kind of figure that part out. Even asking the question, hey, wow, you're really suffering a lot. That's hard. I feel your angst. What can I do? What would you like from me? What can I do that would help you? Are there certain things I can say, certain things I can ask? What is it? And letting them tell us.
Yeah. All right, this is the last question. This is where we'll end.
All right.
So it kind of ties into this idea. I'm just going to read it as it's stated, and if you need me to repeat it, I'll repeat it. Say there are two people, both stuck in a negative thinking pattern, in a relationship or maybe a parent and child. Is there a passage we can keep in our pocket to disrupt or reset that conversation in the moment?
I think we're out of time, Scott.
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it? Yeah.
Read that one again.
Yeah,
I need
I'm
to
gonna
buy
read it
some
again.
time
Yeah,
on this
it's
one.
it. Yeah. Say there are two people, both stuck in a negative thinking pattern. Maybe, for example, a relationship, or maybe the relationship of a parent and a child. Right. Is there a passage we can keep in our pocket to disrupt and reset that conversation in the moment?
I think sometimes in that kind of dysfunctional dynamic, it's easy for two people to start thinking the worst of each other. I just went back in my mind as you read that to Philippians 4:8, that I thinking, okay, what's excellent, praiseworthy, true about this person? Mm-hmm. Not just generally in life, about this person. And I think that can disrupt that.
Yeah. I think that's a really helpful framework. I mean, it's easier said than done, of course. And could we just thank Erik for doing this? I mean, that's this is not an easy thing to do, but we really want to, in this journey together, honor the questions and the spaces where we find ourselves today. And so I'm just really thankful that you would be with us today, and that you're helping us just think differently about the things that we're thinking about. I want to move us now to just conclude our time. I'm gonna close us in prayer, and then we will move forward with the Lord's Supper and continuing in our worship. God, we know that this probably brings to the surface a plethora of other questions too. But thank you for meeting us in this space. Thank you for the idea that in you, new life and a new way to experience renewal is possible. Through the person and work of Jesus. But thank you, God, that your presence meets us where we are, how we are, and continues to walk with us, each day through the joys and through the dark night of the soul. Thank you for your love for us. In the name of Christ, we pray. Amen.